Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderfall Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. So today we're going to do a little bit of a review, post-event analysis on the event I've just run. It's called the Cinderfall District Grand Tournament. Now this was supposed to be a bit larger an event, but due to all the COVID stuff and some of the places within Australia not faring so well in recent months, it's actually had its numbers significantly reduced to where we were originally intending, but we ran the event anyway, and we had a lot of the South Australian crew out in force. We managed to get 20 players in total, and we had a full GT. We played 5 games, and it was a lot of fun. I did not compete. I managed to get 20 other players, so this was really cool. Meaning I could sit back and enjoy my GT running and see how it all went, and really focus and think about it more so going on in the future. And so today we're just going to talk about like my thoughts on the GT. We'll talk a little bit about winners and all that sort of stuff and hobby. I'll also talk about like how I ran the event, what the rules were, like what the tournament pack was like and stuff like that. But not go through the tournament pack in like any full detail, but we'll go through and talk a little bit about, I guess, the important things. So let's get started with that. And so we'll explain, I guess, the tournament pack to start with and the idea behind the GT. So originally, the whole idea behind the GT was we've had South Australian GT now for 2 years. That's run by Mike from Doom and Darkness, which is really cool. It's been a great event for our community to get behind. And that's been a lot of fun. I've attended both and had a ton of fun. Now, we wanted to sort of push our community a little bit forward, and can we get 2 GTs happening in a year? And, well, we think we've managed to do that. And so we've pushed for the second GT, and I'm running the second GT in South Australia, called the Cinderfall District Grand Tournament. Now, it's been interesting. I did my own sort of thing. I wanted it to be different from South Australia GT, and be my own sort of thing, and use things that I like. So, to start with, like, it was going to be 2,000 points, 5 games, 6 games. You know, we probably, like, most people just don't do 6 games. You probably should play 6 games, but I think it, with interstaters, like the original plan being involving them, it gets really hard to fly out of Adelaide late at night, and so you're having to book off that Monday as well. So that's the reason we go for 5 games. There were no legends allowed in the event, so this was just a thing. I just don't keep up with it. I think it's time to move on personally. That's my own opinion. And so, yeah. Talking about like scoring wise, before we talk scoring, we should talk about like games. Everything was set in the Realm of Fire. So for those who don't know, the whole name of the channel actually comes from the Shadows over Hammerhall box set. The place in Hammerhall you play in is called the Cinderfall District, and so that's where the whole channel name comes from. So we were going to set the game in the Realm of Fire. The whole tournament was set in the Realm of Fire. We played 5 games, and the scenarios we played were Total Conquest, Scorched Earth, Focal Points, Forcing the Hand, and Blade's Edge. We put both the new scenarios in there. We were originally going to play a couple of different scenarios, but I figured we should play the 2 new ones, and let's have a look at this. And so the idea behind picking the scenarios that I picked was very important based on how I did the scoring. So with the scoring for the event, you, like paint and sports to start with, were not involved in the overall scoring at all. However, you could be negatively affected by taking by both. So you couldn't get positive effects. Paints would get their own award, sports would get their own award. But if you were a bad sport, you would, ask to leave potentially, or just be docked points. And painting, if like things were subpar or not up to scratch, and you really tried to cheat your way onto the system, you would be punished for it in your overall tournament score. Now, different scoring and secondaries and stuff. So we played with like the new GHB, obviously with the 2 new battle plans. So secondaries were in the games like setting, or auxiliaries as they're calling them in the GHB. Most people found that. I think there was only 1 game of the whole tournament that actually needed to go to it, and actually produced a minor win or minor loss, and there was only 1 of those for the entire event. But the scoring system I used, so we had like a 100-point scoring system. So you got 100 points for a major win, 80 for a minor, 50 for a draw, 30 and 10 for your losses. And so the difference we did with this is we added the victory point total to the game score. So if you got a major victory and scored 22 victory points in the game, you would get 122 points or tournament points. And so this really made me think about the scenarios that I would be picking, because I wanted scenarios to pick where you got a decent amount of victory points on offer. So scenarios like what's it called? I forget the name of the scenario now. I completely things like Blood and Glory or Knife to the Heart. That's the one I was thinking of. Were not options I was particularly fond of taking. Although reflecting back, maybe they could be a good way to break tie. But I think the way I did it worked. So I picked scenarios with lots of victory points anyway to sort of make this scoring system work and be something interesting as a tiebreaker, and without being a true tiebreaker. The tiebreaker I used didn't have to actually be used. Now, no one was actually level on points, so that was cool to see that in 20 people created like some difference in points, though there were some really close point calls. But the tiebreaker I was going to use was going to be head-to-head as my first tiebreaker. So if 2 point players were at level and they'd played each other, the player who won that game would be would get the higher rank. I thought, like other secondaries, I'm not particularly a fan of. I don't really like strength of schedule. Personally, I think a bad round one matchup can really just determine your whole tournament based on strength of schedule. Kill points, obviously, we all know the issues with that. Certain armies just don't die, and certain armies aren't meant to kill. They're meant to gain objectives and stuff, and so it isn't something I'm particularly a fan of. And yeah, so I chose to do head-to-head. And then after that, there would be some other secondaries, but none of that ever came into effect. I guess you could say the first secondary was true, like not a true secondary because it was involved in the initial scoring, but it was sort of a secondary, technically, I guess, was the victory points, and then the second one was head-to-head. So that was all cool. The scenarios I picked really worked. There were some things in the order potentially I would change with how I did this, but I think all in all it was rather good. So potentially the only scenarios I'd probably change around would maybe be at the end of the tournament I did Blade's Edge, and this isn't really a high scoring scenario. Now I know, necessarily it's not always cool, but it's cool to have multiple people fighting it out. In this tournament in particular, we had 6 players who actually could have won the event, and I think had I swapped the scenarios around Blade's Edge and Forcing the Hand, it could have created for a much more interesting last game, with the points in Blade's Edge being rather limited compared to those in Forcing the Hand. Now, something I did was put focal points at number 3, so the last game on day 1. And the reason I did this is because focal points has, once again, a very high number of victory points that are available to you, and this allows a big difference in scoring. There are lots of different scores in this scenario, and so this split the pack in a very similar way to what the minor major for Knife to the Heart, Blood and Glory can do. And so these very wildly different, some people are only scoring 6 or 7 points, and then you had some people who were scoring 40 points in focal points, and this really helped split the pack up. And so in the overall tournament points, you can really see that big gap in the middle between the top half and the bottom half, which is really cool to see that work. But yeah, I was really happy with how the tournament went. Note on both the new scenarios too, players absolutely loved them on the second day. Both new scenarios got very positive reviews from all players at the event, so that was good to see. I do think these two are probably two of the best scenarios in the book, along with Focal Points and Total Conquest. Personally, Scorched Earth is the only scenario I'm not, set in. I think the 4 scenarios I used are probably set in stone. And I guess the last thing to say on scenarios is I really do like things that some of these scenarios where they have like get extra points for taking different things in your army, like focal points is for monsters and stuff like that. So that's all pretty cool, which is awesome. And the different things you can take from all these things. So, you know, you get extra points for battle line in some, you get extra points for monsters and focal points as mentioned, and extra points for heroes in others. I think all of this is really, really cool, and makes people take different sort of lists. So let's get into the actual, I guess, event winners and stuff like that. And what we got, you can see the picture up there, up there, of the winner, and that was Alexander Kron, or Cancron as most people would remember, the KO player who almost won CanCon a couple of years back. He finally is no longer the bridesmaid of AOS, and finally the bride, got his first GT win and took it out by a solitary victory point. He went 4-1. He actually lost to the person who came second, but managed to get enough victory points to keep himself in front by that solitary point. Which is really cool because it means like in this tournament every point mattered, and that's what I was really going for. I wanted everyone to play all their games out to the conclusion and really try and score every victory point they possibly could, because they all mattered in the end. Coming second was Luke Dimon. He ran a Slaanesh list with Archaon in it, and third was a Slaves to Darkness list with Archaon in it and Vanguard, the 6th circle. In fourth, we had a Flesh-Eater Courts army just sneaking in on the last 4-1 army. And that was pretty cool. Then we had some Khorne and Ogres, and the Gloomspite and Stormcast armies universally finished in the bottom half. Big Wow, there was one in the bottom half, one in the top half, and it was really cool. In fact, that's probably worth mentioning as well, that I think our local meta is rather healthy. We had one player had to drop out, unfortunately, but we got a replacement in. So we went from originally being 16 different armies out of 20 to 15 different armies out of 20. Though in that 15, both Big War armies were, one was Savage Auric heavy and one was Ironjaws heavy. And the 3 Gloomspite armies that were there were all very, very different. One being Squigs, one being Spiders, and one being Goblins. So this was all really cool. Now, Best Painted went to Chris Becker and his Squig army, his Gloomspite Git Squig army. But other top contenders were the Slaanesh army and the Gloomspite Spiders, along with the Sylvaneth army at the tournament as well. Lastly, the Best Sports went to Jason Tipping, who took Nighthaunt. And so there's probably some mention, there were some really cool lists at the tournament. There was the Stormcast Vanguard Auxiliary Chamber list, taking all the battalions, like 400 points in battalions, and taking a cool list using all those different moving pieces. And then there was also a triple battalion Nighthaunt list that actually did won one of its games and then sort of fell off the rails and didn't win any more for the tournament, but that's okay. It was a cool list. There was some really interesting things. There were 2 Archaons, and at one point they were on top table fighting it out. But all in all, I think that they did really well. I'm sure to go into more about all of the armies that won, you can probably go look at them. I'll post a link to the lists that were at the event. The only one that won't be there is the Bone Splitter Heavy Big War list. We'll have our Daughters of Cain list that was actually submitted there, and not our Gumby list, but that's what it is. And I'm sure you can go check out Aethercast soon. I'm sure Alexander Kron will be on Aethercast chatting away with his other KO generals, talking about his own list, so I won't steal his thunder there, but that was really cool. All in all, I'm really happy with the tournament. I'm really happy with how it went. I think there's a few little bits and pieces I'd change. I'd really like to up my own tournament, get my terrain game at the tournament. I like the realm rules, how they are. I really like them. They won't be disappearing. I really liked my scoring system. I've probably got to think of a third secondary really heavily after head-to-head and the points, or I guess a second secondary. Scenario-wise, I was quite happy. Like I said, Scorched Earth was the only one I'm not sold on keeping, but obviously potentially by the time I run the next GT this time next year, we'll have a new GHB to run under, and the scenarios may change a little bit then. But that's it from me today. Thanks all for listening. If you have any questions, any thoughts, leave them in the comments down below. I'd like to know your thoughts on like the idea of like how the scoring went and the scenarios are picked, your experiences with them. But definitely leave some comments down below and let me know what you thought. I'll see you soon, guys and gals. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. It was nice and fun to run the Cinderfall GT and run my first ever GT. And if you've got any thoughts, ideas, suggestions or questions, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget also to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Every subscriber means the world to us, and definitely every like helps. Also, if you'd like to, you can join our Discord server. You can find that linked down below in the description of the video. And you can also find our Twitch channel there, which you should definitely go and give us a follow. We're trying to hit 50 followers, and it'd be great to hit that nice and soon. Lastly, though, in the description, you will also find a link to our Patreon, where you can help support the channel more if you so wish to. But a special thank you to all our people who support us on Patreon. They're all fantastic human beings. You can definitely give a big thank you shout out to Cinderfall Guard Militia, Christian Weir, Soren, Philip Ward and Chaos Spawn, and our Cinderfall Free Good Regiment members James and AGC. Thank you all for the support. It means the world to us. But everyone, that's it from us today. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.